Hi crocheters, welcome back to my crochet channel. Today I'm very excited to share with you my latest crochet top and how I made it. So this crochet top was actually inspired by the scrap yarn beanie I released not too long ago, made in the back loops only and made with scrap yarn. So that scrap yarn beanie got me thinking, what if I made a top using the same method of working in the back loops only, and instead of working the top from top to bottom or bottom to top, I worked like sideways. And what if I could also have as little sewing as possible? One piece with maybe minimal sewing. So once I had this idea in my head, I could not stop thinking about it, and I basically dropped everything that I was working on so that I could experiment and play around with this idea. Okay, let me show you how I did this. So for this particular top, I got my trusty measuring tape. I just measured from where I guess the armhole is, and I used actually my bra as a guide as well, making sure that, you know, it kind of lines up around there, and then how low I wanted it to be. I didn't really want a crop top, so I measured like this, and that's about 10 inches. And then I measured across this way. This is about 4 inches or so. So 4 inches this way, 10 inches that way. For the front part, I didn't really measure that because I figured I would start crocheting across this way and then add the straps and then see how far the straps would go, and then decide how high I wanted the neckline to start, where I wanted it to be. So that's why I didn't really measure that. Maybe you want your neckline to be down to here and then across to where you want the next strap to be. And then for the straps, you want to measure for the length, the full length of the top. What I did was measure from where I wanted the top to start from. So again, I didn't want it to be a crop top. I kind of wanted it to be just below my natural waist, so essentially cover my belly button. So I have measuring tape going where the shoulder seam typically would go, down to where I want the top to rest. That is 20 inches for me. So that's how I measure, so that when I start to work on the straps, I know that, okay, once I get to the 4 inches or whatever it is for your measurements, when I get to this part, then I would just add my stitches to 10 inches, because if this is 10 inches and I need this to be 20 inches, then this needs to be 10 inches. So when you're starting this top, just take down those measurements first, because that's really going to help you as you work. Okay, so now that we have the measurements, let's grab our yarn and get started. Okay, so I'm going to start with the underarm. So I'm going to chain until I have 10 inches, about the height of my underarm measurements. I have my ruler handy so that I can measure it as I go. Okay, I'm not quite there yet. So I've reached 10 inches, and I'm just going to work one more chain to start this row. And now I'm going to work a half double crochet into the second chain from the hook, and in each chain across. You could also start with a foundation half double crochet instead of making a chain and then working your stitches, but I did not think of doing this before I started. So if you are seeing this before you start, you do have that option. All right, so now at the end of the row, I'm going to turn and chain 2. And now I'm going to be working in the back loops only, but for the first and the last stitch of every row, I'm going to work in both loops. So in this first stitch, I'll work in both loops. And then in the remaining stitches, I'll be working in the back loops only. So half double crochet into each stitch across into the back loop. Okay, coming up to the end of this row, I'm going to work into both loops of the last stitch. And then I'm going to chain 2 and turn.
And I'm going to continue to work these rows, starting the row with a stitch in both loops, and then each stitch after is in the back loop only. So I'm going to continue to work rows in half double crochet until this underarm side seam area is about 4 inches or so. Make sure you keep following along with your own measurements and that you are meeting those numbers.
Okay, so here is the side seam piece so far, and I'm just checking to make sure that it's the right size, and I think it is. Yeah, this is the underarm width, and then now I've just started to work some rows to start creating the straps. So that's what I'm gonna continue to work on next. I started working this row, and when I get to the end, I'm going to be using foundation half double crochets to add more stitches to start creating the straps. Now, I'm a bit slow when it comes to foundation stitches, so bear with me. There are lots of tutorials out there. If you know a better way of doing this, please feel free to do that instead. How I do it is I insert the hook in the previous stitch, then I'm going to drop a loop, make a chain, and then that creates the foundation chain, and then yarn over and pull through all loops to create the half double crochet. So I'm going to repeat those steps until the entire piece measures 20 inches because that's the length that I want my straps and bodice piece to be. So adding the length and then the length of the strap. So all of that combined together is going to be about 20 inches. Slowly going to work on my foundation half double crochet stitches. This is going to be a while. All right, I'm going to spare you watching me struggle while making these foundation half double crochets, and I will see you back here when I have reached 20 inches on this piece. As I work, I'm continuing to measure to make sure that I'm getting the right measurements. Checking to see that this actually looks how I want it to look. So I've got the 20 inches. I like how this is looking. I need to make sure to take note of the number of stitches that I added during the foundation chains so that I can repeat that on the opposite side and I don't have lopsided straps. Now I'm going to continue to work this long strap. So I'll work until I have this much. I need to measure what that is. So I'll work until then as long straps. And then once I'm done with that, then it's going to be the neck part. For the neck, if you can imagine, I'm going to basically work up to a certain point and then work short rows until the next strap, and then repeat the same thing with adding the stitches to make the second strap and then back down, and then repeating the same thing with the other side seam. Here's the top after adding rows to the first strap, and I'm double checking that the underarm area still fits well, and I'm deciding if I'm happy with the width of the strap so far, and I am. I'm also placing a stitch marker at the top where I want the neckline to reach. Now that I've worked the number of rows across to make the first strap, this is where I want the neck to start. So I'm going to work my half double crochet stitches up to this point here, and then I'm going to turn and then work back and do these shorter rows. And I'm going to work across in these short rows until it covers the front, and then I will start on the second strap. One thing I forgot to mention is that I made sure to end my last row at the bottom hem of the top so that I could work my way back to the neckline stitch marker. Okay, now at the end of this row, where I've got the stitch marker is where I'm going to say this is the last stitch of the row, and I'm going to work into both loops of the stitch. And then I'm going to turn and continue working, leaving the remaining stitches. And I'll continue to work on these shorter rows, and then we'll move on to the second strap. Here's the top so far. So you can see I've got one shoulder strap done, and I've worked across. So I've got the front part of it. Now I'm going to start working on the second strap. 6 rows for the strap. So I'll work 6 rows to make the second strap, and then I'll work on the second side underarm area. One of the things I loved most about making this top was the flexibility to adjust the size as I went along. So when working on the underarm and the side body sections, I simply crocheted until the fabric perfectly covered the area. And for the front and back of the top, along with the straps, I crocheted until the straps reached my shoulders. So with the 2 straps done, I can now start on the second underarm side area. And here's the entire piece. I've got both front and back and both sides done. I think it's just so cool. This top is all in one piece. So when I did the back and the second set of straps, I played around with the height of the back, and I'm thinking that this might be a reversible top, which this is another thing I love about this top.
Okay, I've gone ahead and I have cut my yarn, and now I'm going to sew the side seam. And just wanted to make a note that I added 2 extra rows into the last, oh no, what did I do here? Oh no, I don't even know what that is. It's like almost like I did a half double crochet in both loops, but not really. Like, oh no. Ugh. Oh, this is the kind of thing that I kind of want to undo, but I mean, it's not that many rows. Maybe it's okay. It's okay. Let's just pretend that we didn't see that. It looks wonderful. Okay, let's just move on and sew the seam. So as I was saying, I added 2 extra rows to this side part of the top. So in the beginning, with the first part of the underarm section, I had started with 12 rows, and then when I was working into the back part, or I guess the other side of the top, I actually added 2 extra rows. So that means that I had to add 2 extra rows to the end, so that both underarm areas have 14 rows. Okay, so now I'm just gonna grab an embroidery needle. Actually, I don't even know if this is actually called an embroidery needle, but it is smaller than your usual thick yarn needle. And you can use whatever sewing joining technique you prefer. I think for this particular project, I'm just gonna do a whip stitch all the way across. And I will do my best to line the stitches together. And I think for this, I'm going to also work in continuing with the whole working in the back loop only. I'm going to also just sew into the back loop and into the foundation, the bottom of the foundation chain from the first row. While I think about the stitch that looks like a half double crochet in both loops, but in a really weird way, I don't understand what happened there. That's gonna bother me. But like I said, I'm just gonna pretend I didn't see it. And when I wear this top, you won't even notice it, I'm sure. Well, I ended up frogging the top to the weird stitch because who am I kidding? I wasn't going to let that go. It was too obvious for me, and I just know I'd be thinking about it every time I wore the top. So even though I was done crocheting the top and I was already starting to sew the side seams, I just had to redo that portion. Thankfully, it was near the end, so it's not like I had to frog the entire top. That would have been so sad, but I redid it and I went ahead and sewed the side seam. And here I'm just sewing the shoulder straps together. When I'm sewing the shoulder straps, I'm working into the row edges and trying to insert my needle into the stitches. And of course, some of these are starting chains, so I am also going in between the chains and trying to grab a good amount of yarn with each stitch, just to make sure that it's not going to be flimsy and I'm not just inserting the needle into a single strand of yarn. Basically, I just want to make sure that the straps are going to hold the weight of the top once I'm wearing it. And again, I am using a whip stitch to sew the shoulder straps, just as I did with the side seam. While I'm sewing, here's a tip I learned while making this top. Make a sample or template, which I will show you at the end. And I made this with worsted weight yarn just to get your measurements. This way it won't take as long if you're working with a finer weight yarn, and you'll finish it much faster, and you'll be able to put it on and see how it fits and feels on your body. Once you have your sample, measure the width of the side areas, the length of the straps, and how long or high the neck is. From there, any top you make with this method, you can play around to make the straps thicker, the neck higher, the back lower, etc. All right, and here's the finished crochet top. All right, I think it's time to go try this on. All right, so the top fits wonderfully, and this particular yarn that I'm using, this is a mercerized cotton. I don't know if I mentioned that at the beginning, but it's a very, very soft, almost, I want to say, luxurious for cotton. And it feels very, very nice. But because of the nature of the yarn and just the structure of it, it's very drapey. It is going to add weight. And over time, my worry is that this is going to stretch quite a bit, especially in the underarm area, and I just don't want this to start to sag under my arms. So what I'm going to do, and also just as a finisher, I guess, just to give it a little bit more polished look, I'm just going to work one round of single crochet around the straps and the neck area. And then for the underarms, I'm going to do a single crochet as well. But I think for the armpit or underarm area, I'll probably do slip stitches just to make sure that it doesn't stretch over time. So I'm going to start with the underarm area and grabbing my hook and the yarn, and I'm just going to pick up a stitch. It could be anywhere really. I'm just going to start here. I'm going to single crochet and then do some slip stitches in the underarm area. I'm going to work the stitches into the existing stitches, and then for the other stitches, I'm going to work them into the row edges. All right, so here I'm going to slip stitch into the edges in the underarm. And I'm going to do this as evenly as possible. Using slip stitches is a great way to make sure your work doesn't lose too much of its shape over time, and you can even use slip stitches to add shaping to garments, especially, as I mentioned, if the fabric is going to weigh things down and stretch over time. When you're working slip stitches like this, make sure the tension isn't too tight because you also don't want the fabric to bunch up. Once I've worked all the way around the armhole and I get to the end, I'm just going to slip stitch into the first stitch and cut the yarn and weave in the ends. Here's one armhole done so far, and you can see the difference in how much it stretches compared to the armhole that has the single crochet and slip stitches holding the shape better. Moving on to the neck and straps, I'll repeat the same thing, working single crochet stitches all the way around, and I'm starting at the back, but really you could pick up your stitches anywhere. When I get to the shoulder seams, I'm going to reinforce the straps a little more by working a few slip stitches before and after the shoulder seams. I worked 5 slip stitches, but you can do more or less depending on how stretchy your fabric feels or your own personal preference.
And here she is. This is the finished top. I think it looks amazing and it feels really great. Okay, let's put this on. And here is the finished top. Even with having to frog part of it with that little mistake that I had and documenting the tutorial, like this took very little time to make. It was very, very easy. and I really enjoyed how simple it was, the construction, the method of it all. Okay, so I said I would show you the worsted weight version that I basically used as a sample prototype. I used Lion Brand Vanna's Choice in a size 6mm crochet hook to make it, and it took even less time to make. So yeah, I basically used this as a template. This particular version has the same height for the back and the front neckline. So when I went to make the lightweight version, I knew that I liked where it sits. I liked where the neckline sat on this version, so I knew that, you know, I could probably make the neckline a bit lower or a bit higher for this other version, for the second version. So you can see the difference. Like, this was supposed to be the back, but I actually enjoyed wearing it like this as well. So, you know, I have the option to make the neckline a little bit higher if I wanted to. And then once I had this version completed, I was able to play around with the number of rows that I worked here, and and I was able to see how the top would fit with this particular method, which is really handy, just because I wasn't sure how it would turn out in the end. But having this gave me a really good guide of what I could do with this top and how I could put it together, and if this would actually work without taking too much time in figuring things out. So with this simple method, you can make a light, flowy, lightweight top that's great for warmer weather. You can also make a thicker, cozier top that you could wear as a vest, put something on underneath, but this would be really great for fall and winter. So let me know in the comments if you have any questions, if you found this video helpful, if you think that you're going to make a top like this, and if you like this method of making crochet garments, or if you just want to say hi. Thank you so much for joining me in making this crochet top. I hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.